Hey everyone,
Hey.
Andrew Hall, Tubman Templeman, Big Zeb. Crazy story about forced baptisms, right? I mean, how nuts is
Oh,
that?
hmm
yeah.
And when you're at the water anyway, if you have the water source, why not a forced enema too?
Wow,
You get a really good cleaning out.
my mind is blown. I never even went in that direction, but thank you for putting that unfortunate thought and visual in my mind, Big Zebra.
You're welcome. That's why I'm here.
That's why you're here. Oh, well, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
You
You
know,
were saying, oh,
whenever
sorry.
What's
the
that, Peter?
first time I went skiing, nobody told me not to fall like backwards, like you just let yourself fall backwards because water just forces its way in
Mm.
there. It's painful. I was like, wait, why didn't y'all tell me this?
Dude, you know, I only tried to go skiing once. At first, I thought skiing, it's easy. It's like sledding, right? You just kind of go down a hill. You just let gravity do the work. How difficult is it? And then quickly, I was shocked to find out that skiing is a sport and it
Mm.
requires core strength. And funny
Mm.
thing about me, I have no core strength. It's part of the muscle problem I have. Um, and so I'm there trying to take a skiing lesson from someone like if you think about the bell curve, right? The normal range of muscularity of muscle mass, I am at least one standard deviation down. I am like
Mm.
subpar. While this woman who is teaching me how to ski, teaching me in quotes, um, is obviously one standard deviation higher than average because she's like a semi-pro. And I'm like, I do not think you really understand how this works, or and you do not know how to really teach people how to do things because you're telling me what you're asking me what sport am I good at when trying to
Mm.
teach me this sport, and it's like none. There's no sport I'm good at. There is absolutely, I mean,
Uh,
darts, pool, maybe, but that doesn't. There's no carryover skills with darts or pool.
no, no. Well, the thing is that being physically incompetent makes a person difficult to teach. I know because I'm one of them. And it's hard to explain to someone that, no, I need to see you do it again
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
this simple movement seems very complex to me.
Well, yeah. And as I was explaining it to my kids years ago, how do you break apart something? How do you understand a difficult thing? You break it up into its constituent pieces, right? It's a constituent. That's how that's how you understand evolution. It's small steps, right? You break down something complicated into its simpler parts. And but the thing is, if you've never had to do that before, right, then it's difficult. It's like there's 11. I think it's like 11 or 13 different steps on how to tie your shoes, right? That's a classic example.
Mm.
I'm often I had the other problem where I look at things and I'm like, "Oh, that's simple. That's easy. I'm going to go do that." My kid just got into making whips, like legitimate snake whips and bull whips. Like they have BBs that run down the core. Like he goes through a lot of steps to make these things. And he'll get outside and he like just uses it with little effort. It seems like he's swinging his hand. I'll get out there and it's silly. I can't
It's
even make
silly.
it pop. I can't make it
Mm.
No,
pop.
but I have to ask you. You mentioned that there's the bull whip, and
Uh-huh.
then there's a snake whip.
Yes.
I
There's
have never
differences.
heard of that before. I've never heard
Heard
of a
of a
snake whip.
bullwhip?
Yeah.
Is
I
a
think the
snake
snake whip is just a smaller whip. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
hmm,
But there might
hmm.
be a difference in the way that it's actually made.
Right, right.
I think there was a Disney character named Bullwhip Griffin from years ago, and he had a film.
Oh, wow. I
I don't see how that's relevant or how it
That
helps the
seems to be
conversation.
maybe from the age of the Crocodile Dundee. That's how that. If I was going to guess what time period that was from, like
I
bullwhip
think it
period.
predates Crocodile
Oh,
Dundee.
really?
I'm looking it up right now.
Okay.
Bullwhip Griffin. There it is.
Wow.
And the Google machine is The Adventures of Bullwhip Griffin, 1967.
Oh, that was in the right. That was in the before time.
Yeah, well, I was born in 1964,
Oh, okay.
so this would have been on TV as a repeat.
Right. Interesting.
Uh,
Interesting. Yeah. So, a bunch of my friends, they didn't build their own bullwhips, but they bought bullwhips when I was in high school. We were at the
Jeez.
Brockton Fair, pretty sketchy place to begin with, and it all started with one of my buddies buying a bullwhip, and then
Oh.
all of a sudden everybody needed to have a bullwhip, and I was like, I'm not buying a bullwhip. Why?
Mm,
I don't need a bullwhip. And two, I don't think I have the rotator strength to really do the
mm,
proper the whipping. It took me a long time to figure out how to ride a bike. And I would hurt myself. I feel like I would hurt myself with a bullwhip, to tell you the truth.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
nunchucks are even worse.
Yeah.
I once had a guy come into my family's bookstore, and we sold martial arts books because
Yeah.
they sold. And
Yeah.
he came in looking for, they're not nunchucks, but imagine 3-yard long
Oh yeah, I know the
sticks that
weapon.
are connected to by 2 chains.
Sure.
And he comes in and he's got this huge cast on his right arm. And I say, "Oh, yes, well, we've got a book on, oh, what happened to your arm?" He said, "Well, I was exercising on these things and I broke my arm." And I said, "Oh, well, so you want to read a book on it to become better at it?" And he said, "Yeah, exactly." And I said, "Well, isn't this really the sort of thing you need a person there to show you how to do it?" It sounds, but he
And this was
insisted he could learn it from a book.
and this was before the age of YouTube too, right? Because on
Yes.
YouTube, I'm sure that you could at least see someone operate the weapon system properly. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, if it looks complicated, like nunchucks and this 3-rod weapon connected with 2 chains, if it
Yes.
looks complicated, more than likely it really is complicated. you know, and
Well,
and
it was another weird day in the bookstore, I can tell you.
and when you look at, like, butterfly knives were really popular when I was a kid, right? When I was in
Mm.
high school, it's like I never got a butterfly knife. Why? Because I'm going to hurt myself with a butterfly knife. If you don't know how to use a weapon properly, you're going to get hurt. There's a good chance you're going to get hurt with that weapon.
Those are legal in Canada. Are they still legal in the U.S.?
They were butterfly knives. I'm not sure.
Hey, to the Google machine. By the way, Dr. Kennard, I only saw the headline about the Russian cruise missile ship.
Yeah.
Can you sort of update me, because that
Yeah.
sounds interesting?
It's an interesting story, because this is it's an old weapon system that the Ukrainians put better computer components into. So what it is, it isn't a shoulder-based weapon system. It's called the Neptune. It isn't a shoulder-based system. It's a mobile system. So you basically drive it around with a truck. It's in
Hmm.
you have truck, and it's 4 missile tubes. And it's really clever what the Ukrainians did. So they used a drone that they got from Turkey to distract the crew on the missile carrier on the ship, and then they shot the missiles at the ship. So the anti-missile systems didn't really have a lot of time to kick in, and there are different reports, because everything's we're in the fog of war. So it appears that some of the munitions on the ship exploded. Not the main missile, not the main missiles that the ship was carrying, but some of the munitions exploded, because that's what you want to do, right? If you're attacking a ship, you want to lodge something, you want to make things explode after the initial explosion of the bomb, or missile, or whatever you're shooting at it.
Mm.
So everyone had. What I do know is the Moskva. I believe that's the name of it, named for Moscow. And it was the head of the Black Sea Fleet. All the 500 sailors had to evacuate, and it's out of commission. The different report. I don't think it's sunk, but it is out of commission right now.
Mm.
So
Well, more good news out of Ukraine.
yeah. It is it's an interesting story about how the Ukrainians have been able to for how a small force like the Ukrainians have been able to pretty much slow down and incapacitate, at least temporarily, at the very least, the Russian forces.
Mm. Well, I hope it continues. I just in the back of my mind, I know it's unlikely that you're going to have 400,000 Russians appear on the border and just march over, but
Well, that's when there was a winter war, and I talk about the winter war every once in a while.
mhm,
And you can Google that or YouTube search it from 1939 to 1940 between the Finns and the Russians. And the way how the Russians won that war is that they just sent a lot of guys. They just sent like
mhm.
by the end of this conflict, the Finns might have had like 150,000 people defending against
Against 400,000, I think it was,
against
or about that.
400,000, 500,000. So that's how the Russians were eventually able to overwhelm the Finns in that war. Does Putin have the guys to actually take it all? I don't know. I mean, it all matters how much he wants it and how much chaos it causes within the country. Because when the Russians see, this is my Russian history moment here.
Mm,
When the Russians lost the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, that caused a revolution. When the Russians lost the World War I, that caused a revolution. I'm not saying that Putin, you never know how brittle a regime is, especially a dictatorial regime, because it's a black box. You can't really see inside of it. But
mm.
military defeats can adversely affect how stable and a dictator's regime is.
Yeah, what if the new general that's been assigned decides that he's going to assemble all the troops and not invade?
Well, you're there. Well, the thing is, this is I saw Putin as threatening. Yeah, that's when things go sideways for Putin, that's what he says. And I'm
Hmm.
not saying that that's an empty threat either. I mean, there's different ways that you can use nukes without using nukes in Ukraine. You can just blow up nuclear power plants. But when things go south, when things go sideways for Putin, he says those things to make people afraid. What's up, 420? So yeah, if you're going to mass forces, typically you're going to use them. Like, I don't know if you remember Desert Shield back in
Mm.
the Elders. You send like a couple of 100,000 people out into the middle of a desert, then more than likely they're going to get used, right? Despite all the diplomacy, more than likely something's going to happen. If Russia is going to send all those guys to the border, to the eastern border, well, to Ukraine's eastern border, more than likely they're going to be used. Simply Secular Dave says, I don't mind if Putin uses one nuke on himself. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. It might be a little overkill, but I could accept that. Sure.
Oh God. Well, I wonder about. Sorry.
What the real concern that I have is that after everything is over, right, regardless of how it shakes out, that people take the wrong lessons away from the conflict.
Mm.
Because the Russian military right now looks like the Keystone Cops, right?
Yes.
And for us in the West to assume, or in China or other states to assume the Russians are a bunch of punks, that's not the right lesson to learn. That's not, yeah, because once again, I keep belaboring this point, but when Hitler saw the Russians do so badly in the Winter War, and after Hitler did so well on the continent, he
Mm.
thought it would just be easy to knock Russia off, and it was, of course, not. So, you got to take the right lessons. You got to take the right lessons from these conflicts.
Yes, and in Hitler's case, the winter worked against him, whereas in Finland, winter was working against the Russians.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're two different things that are strangely similar.
In my defense, 100% true. Some of these are my girlfriend's books.
Mm.
you know. I do have a couple of interesting ones close by, ones that everyone should read. Yeah, like The Selfish Gene. If you haven't read this, if you've read The God Delusion, but if you haven't read this is really his seminal work right here,
Mm.
Dawkins. This is, changed my whole way of thinking about genetics.
Last night I saw part of a documentary about propaganda, and it was called The Great Hack. And the
Yeah.
way they were talking about stuff, like, I don't think I'm that influential. Like, I don't think I can read something and then I'm gonna go, oh, okay, yeah, this is how it's going on. Like, I, I don't know. It
Yeah.
seems like the way people talk about propaganda, sometimes they talk about it like it is hypnotizing people. I don't know. Am I wrong or I?
Well,
I don't
it's important not to assume that people are as clear-headed as you are, Mr. Tobin.
Also, you wouldn't be getting you may be getting wrong information during in a propaganda regime. You
Yeah.
get the wrong information, but you don't necessarily get the right information. So it becomes the communal, conventional wisdom. Oh, America's up to it again. Well, is it really? Oh, the Nazis have taken over the Ukraine. We better go in. Well, we know that Nazis are still around. I guess it could be happening in the Ukraine. And so on and
And
so
I
forth.
will say, and I don't want to tell tales out of school, but a friend of mine's significant other, I'll say that, they got brainwashed. I'll use the word brainwashed into anti-COVID stuff, into hardcore anti-vaccine stuff, to the
Mm.
point that it jeopardized their children as well as their marriage too.
But see,
So
if this like started getting put into my news feed, anti-vaccine stuff, it just wouldn't do it to me to where I'd be like, oh, okay, there is something to this.
yeah.
Like
Well,
it's like you have to have that already. Like I don't know. It got confusing to me. Like
yeah.
I didn't.
I'm officially happily divorced. 100% true. I just want to say that right there.
Mm.
Well, the thing is, Tobin, how we, messaging, who do we message to, right? I mean, on YouTube, you would think that, and YouTube's an exception to the rule because you see hardcore atheists talk to hardcore Christians, right? And that's what gets clicks. But in all reality, if you're trying to sway opinions, you do not try to sway the people who are hardcore. You sway people in the middle, right? And that's what different groups do. It doesn't matter which group it is. It's I've heard Extinction Rebellion, the environmental group, says that do not waste your time trying to convince people who are diametrically opposed to environmentalism. Who you should be talking to are people who are adjacent, people who are in the middle of the road, people who aren't aware. And so those are the people that you can convince en masse. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think TST is another one of those groups that kind of like they don't go out and try to argue with people. Like as far as what I remember, they're trying to build a community
Yeah.
like that they can of like-minded people. They're not really
Yeah.
out there to go and argue with people.
Yeah, Marmaduke points out that people can be more vulnerable at different times, like grief and trauma. You're right about that, Marmaduke. Cult recruiters used to hang around courthouses and hospitals.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
Jerks.
yeah, 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 yeah. And 420 says, "Wonder how Putin must feel seeing the world unite against him. Must feel similar with the man with a little mustache." Well, for someone like Putin, you know, it's interesting to see. I would imagine that he is as frustrated with himself, maybe, as with his FSB, the security force, the secret security forces, because now he's effed himself. He was winning. He was winning, and if he had just continued playing the long game, then NATO might be, especially if Trump was going to get reelected, right? The U.S. could be out of NATO. in like a couple of years.
Mm.
NATO members would still be kind of fighting with each other. Putin would have a gas line directly to Germany without going through Poland, because that's what Nord 2 is, right? Because the Germans up until now had been happy with effing themselves and effing the rest of the Europeans with their stupid energy policies. So if he had continued playing the long game, then, or if he had just started out doing what he's doing now, which is just trying to grab the Donbass region, if he had just done that, yeah, he could have done that maybe in 3 days or 4 days. If he just massed his forces, went in there, grabbed everything, and said, "Hey, I win," do a couple of victory laps. But he didn't do that. He got greedy. He did a lot of confirmation bias, and now that's why he's in the mess he's in.
I wonder if the thing is just that if either any of the three of us had really screwed up, we would go into introspection mode.
Yeah.
But does the sort of person who become a dictator, are they introspective at all? You know, you would think so, but maybe not.
This is why Nazis, other fascists, theocrats are stupid, right? Is because they don't have systems that allow a free exchange of ideas, or even a somewhat free exchange of ideas, right? During the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was an active conversation in the White House with John F. Kennedy and his military advisors about what to do with Cuba. And there was a whole range of options. But because no one was afraid of getting shot in the freaking head in case they said the wrong things to the boss. As soon as you're in that kind of environment that is highly restricted, that you can't have a free exchange of ideas, then you're going to get stupid pretty freaking fast.
And these people that are that, who get elevated to that point, it's crazy, because there are parts in history where, you do have the revolution, or the people will turn on the ruler. You might be all like high and mighty at a moment, but they will drag you through the streets. They will. I mean, it has happened, right?
Well, I'm sure the Romanovs, as they got shot and thrown down a mine shaft, probably couldn't believe it. Like, we're being surrounded, we're being taken away. What the hell?
Yeah, and the thing is, with the Russian with the Russian royal family, there had been assassinations of czars. I think it was Alexander II. He was assassinated, and eventually Lenin's brother, he wasn't involved with the plot, but he was still anti-czarist. He was eventually killed, and that's what got the beef between Lenin's family. That was some personal beef there. But yeah, people in power feel like they're immune. Some people in power, especially in these rigid systems, feel like they are immune from the repercussions of their own actions.
I wonder how many people went to Putin and decided to man up and tell him the truth that the Ukraine was going sideways, and then found themselves ejected into orbit, and blamed for it.
Sure.
The whole blame the messenger thing.
Yep. It's and it isn't just the fact. It is the self-censorship too that is most dangerous, right? Because if you're afraid, it isn't just the fact of the punishment, right? So it's the imagined punishment that you could have, and that's what causes a person not to say exactly what they're thinking. And then sometimes you could say to yourself, well, you could say the right words, but yet they still get ignored. Like the quartermaster for the Wehrmacht in World War II, he said, listen, you get 500 kilometers in there into Russia and everything's going to fall apart. We will not be able to have the supply lines, the logistics, we do not have the logistics to go more than 500 kilometers in there. And what happened? They didn't have the logistics to get all the way through that they needed to go. So yeah, there could have been someone telling Putin that, hey, this isn't going to work, and he's like, "F you, I'm Putin, I can do whatever I want." And he, I mean, you can argue that, Putin's a lot like Bush, Bush the younger in a lot of ways, because, Bush, he ran through Afghanistan. He decided to run through Iraq because, he was feeling like he had the big balls. He was a big swinging dick, typical toxic masculinity kind of stuff. Thought he was invincible. And with Putin, he went through, pretty much sliced through Syria. He bullied Georgia. He got Crimea. And so he thought, why not? Why can't I do this? Completely lost touch with reality.
You know what? Hey, I'll always remember him for, hey, you fool me once, then the third time you got what? Huh?
I just want, it's fascinating though, right? When you think about it, because, because of this Putin invasion, then all of a sudden you have a lot of GOP people who are pro-Putin or were pro-Putin. Now they all have that stain on them, just like Le Pen does, Marie Le Pen in France. And that significantly lowers their chances of getting reelected, being that close to Putin, having all of those photographs or recordings or, articles about how they are pro-Putin.
Yeah, I'd love to see signs out saying, vote for this Republican, he's pro-Putin, and just make it like it's something to be proud of, and just put them all over and see what happens.
Putin might have just, it's ironic if COVID helped get Joe Biden elected, which I still think if it wasn't for COVID, we'd have the second term of Trump right now. But Putin might have given us Donald Trump's political career on a silver platter, maybe, perhaps. That's a little bit of irony right there.
I hope the U.S. is better able to resist Russian infiltration in their next election cycle.
Well, typically what happens is that once again, you look at a historical record, is that the baddies will try or the person who is aggressing, who is the aggressor, they have a couple of tricks up their sleeves, right? And then they play those tricks. And then the other side, if they survive, if they don't surrender, then they get wise to those tricks and then take some kind of countermeasures that will, defend against that kind of stuff. So a lot of historical examples, like, the attack on Pearl Harbor, stuff like that. So, yeah, I would say that whatever the Russians are, once again, if the Russians hadn't invaded Ukraine, no one would be all up and ready and in this extreme defensive posture, either in terms of cybersecurity or in terms of sending more, Sweden and Finland wanting to join NATO, that just wouldn't be happening right now.
Yes, Putin is sort of helping the case along. I'm just really worried that Russia can recover and ultimately take Ukraine.
Well, yeah, what I always thought of it, I thought of it in terms of like the Winter War. I thought that, they just need to get enough people in there and it would just grind down the Ukrainians. But it all matters how much you want it. It all matters how much the Russians want it. In the Winter War, the Finns were able to bloody up the Russians enough so that they didn't take the whole country. They only took a section of the country, which they still have to today, mind you.
Yeah, they took 10% of Finland in that war. They ultimately negotiated it out.
Yeah, they took the juiciest parts. So yeah, it could be something like that. Yeah, which is what I thought. One of the three scenarios: either the Russians completely lose, or we have something akin to like this kind of East versus West kind of Russian satellites, which we already have somewhat in the Donbass regions. So yeah.
There's some thought in the chat that you've done something to Biscuit,
No,
and
Biscuit's actually,
that's why it's not on screen. And I'm encouraging it.
Biscuit, I think Biscuit's probably, sometimes she was in here earlier before the show, but I think she might be downstairs.
Okay, well, another time.
All right, so I'm going to close out the show. This has been a fast half hour. There are videos on Andy's channel with yes, typically on the shorts. I have a playlist of shorts which are very entertaining, if I do say, and informative too.
Mm.
So there's some biscuit stuff there. Telvin Templeman, thank you. Big Zeb, thank you. Cindy, everyone in the chat. Marmaduke. Oh yeah, the reason why I didn't do a show yesterday is because I got my second booster shot, and I don't know if that effed up my sleep patterns, because my sleep patterns are pretty effed up to begin with. But what happened yesterday is I was up at 3 a.m. and then I went back to sleep after being awake for like 2 hours, and then I was just ass. I was just not worth it, to be on screen yesterday.
Dude,
So.
it's crazy. I was feeling similar. Like I had this little tiny cut right on my heel.
Oh, yeah.
Not on my heel, on my ankle, and it scabbed over and started itching really late at night, and I began to make myself sore, so I had to get up. I had to go wash off and tend to myself, because I knew I was just gonna sit there and scratch myself until I bled.
I hope it wasn't a tick.
Huh?
I hope it wasn't a tick.
Oh, no. Yeah, those little boogers. Yeah.
That's dangerous. All right, I'm gonna sign off. Everyone, take care.
Oh,
bye.
Shamala Hamla.
Shamla